At the time of making this video, Blue Lock's Japan vs France has finally come to an end, lasting from chapters 330 to 347, and suffice to say, the opinions on this game were quite mixed, with some people liking it whilst others disliked it. Regardless, I think it's safe to assume that there were a lot of missed opportunities for this game. After the Nigeria game, I, as well as many others, had high expectations for this match, especially with the introduction of Hugo. These expectations revolved around who would play, who would score goals, and the quality of performances from certain players, most notably Loki. And that's what I want to discuss today. The missed opportunities of this match and certain improvements I would make to expand upon what we received. Basically, rewriting the entire game. With so many videos being made on this topic, I know that I'm quite late, but better late than never. And side note, I wish to give credit to all these amazing Blue Lock fan colorists and animators, as I do not own their creative works. They made these amazing pieces of art that I have used in the thumbnail and throughout this video. Please support their work on both Instagram and YouTube. Links will be in the description. I highly implore that you check it out. With that out of the way, let's get started. So before I begin, I will start off by acknowledging the pros and cons of this match. That way we understand what I won't change and what I will change. Firstly, for the pros, the first half of the game was the strongest. There we got a goal from Charles, we received Hugo's introduction and his philosophy, and we also saw the beginnings of Karasu's development, which led to a goal from Hiyori, which was a delightful surprise, by the way. One of my predictions came true. Go check out this video if you want to know more. Additionally, we got more Isagi development as he faced another challenge, and I'm not gonna count him being useless in the first half as a con, as it was clear that the author wanted to challenge him mentally, which affected his playstyle and later allowed him to establish his rebel mentality. And I know damn well the Isagi haters enjoyed this portion of the game. The midfielder allegations were very strong, but I digress. In essence, I think the first half was very balanced pacing wise. Another pro was Karasu's development, which led to us seeing Baro score, even if he did do Shido dirty. But that is what Shido gets for stealing Baro's deserved number 3 spot in the NEL. Also, getting to see Loki actually score a goal 75 minutes into the game when he didn't in the first half was pretty cool. This of course was predated with Hugo's backstory, which was also a nice treat. Moreover, Kunigami getting some focus was pretty good, even if it was minimal. At least he did more than Aiku, the bloody captain of the team. He did not touch the ball one time. Hell, even Shido got some action even though he didn't score, but at least he still got something to do. Unfortunately, however, the cons sort of outweigh the pros, and it all started in the second half. For instance, Charles, even though he scored the opening goal and assisted Hugo, began to fade into the background. He didn't have a chemical reaction with Loki, despite that being his sole purpose and us being teased about it. Furthermore, he barely interacted with Shido, and with how much it was hyped up that Shido would be needed in order to beat France, or how insane Shido and Charles' chemical reaction was in PXG, you would think that these two would interact besides being random stills in the background. But no, he was instead replaced by Hugo. With Hugo being a midfielder, he kind of replaces the need for Charles because Loki specifically said that he was needed to help him be the world's best against Noah. Yet why would you need Charles when you have Hugo right there, a new generation 11? Perhaps he needs Charles to be on the same or similar level to Hugo so that he has another option to utilize in case Hugo is shut down. But I mean, come on, you want Charles instead of the new Gen 11 right next to you. Maybe there's something I'm missing. Okay, so edit future views from Cam here. I just thought about this And I just want to clarify that I ain't heavily knowledgeable on football. I do know that there are different clubs within a country, with PXG, for example, being the in universe equivalent to PSG, a football club for France in real life. So perhaps Loki and Hugo do not play for the same team, and in, let's say, a Champions League arc, Loki and Charles are on the same team, but Hugo isn't with them. And let's say they are playing against Noah, then Charles would be needed. So from that perspective, I understand why Charles would be needed, but for this current game, he was rendered irrelevant. Another con of this match is that Aiku didn't do a damn thing in this entire game. He was barely even around, and when he was, he kept getting dunked on by Loki. I mean, look at him, he's touching nothing but air right now. Now, this is to be expected. This is Loki after all. But still, at least have him do something of note. Heck, even his partner, Ryu, who wasn't even good in this game, at least managed to touch the ball. Meanwhile, Chigiri got subbed out, barely getting the chance to face off against Loki. Gagamaru conceded 4 goals, which I can't be too mad about, since he's facing France, but Konoshiro could have at least made him make 1 save. What else? Let's see. Shido didn't even get to score a single goal, and Rin was absolutely useless, selling the game at the end like the bum he is. And as we've seen in chapter 349, he doesn't even take accountability. What a bum. And even though I mentioned how Isagi being quote-unquote useless wasn't that much of a con, the weekly reading experience made it seem like a much bigger deal than it actually was. The Isagi versus Hugo conflict was the key purpose of the match, which intentionally made him useless for a while, presenting this underdog aspect. As an Isagi fan, I understand the narrative importance of this, as is for his growth and development, because Blue Lock is telling a story. Surprisingly enough, it isn't just hype and aura. However, week to week, Isagi seemed like a burden to the team, with many wondering if he would get benched. And this went on for months, by the way, so it felt dragged out for some. Another potential con is Ryo being somewhat non-existent. You know, it's kind of funny because he can literally copy anybody, right? That was his training. And he only copied one person for this game, which was Kunigami. He was subbed out for Otoya of all people. And you would think that Otoya wasn't necessarily needed because Ryo can literally copy anybody's moves, right? So he could just do that and copy Otoya. It's not like he's in an shonen anime where his copy ability can only be used for like 5 minutes at a time. He can theoretically use it for the full 90 minutes, right? Like there was nothing saying that he couldn't. But regardless, I think he could have done more. Like I said, this game is so weird because there's so much good, but there's a lot of bad and you can't really ignore it too. Loads of Blue Lock content creators have talked about it and I wanted to add my 2 cents. I want to talk about the missed opportunities for this game, such as things I expected to happen or things I wanted to see. I believe these improvements help to expand upon what we already got, without changing the end result. So, with us establishing the pros and the cons, the first point revolves around improving the pacing. The pacing of this match, more specifically in the second half, was absolutely abysmal. If you think about it, yeah? In chapter 344, for example, after Loki scored his goal and Otoya subbed in, we've been shown to have 15 minutes left of the game, right? But somehow, in the literal next chapter, there is only 2 minutes of additional time. So I'm confused. Where did that time go? Because in that 15 minutes, we could have had a Shido goal or another Loki goal. We could have gotten so much more, but the author chose to rush everything. Now, I understand that maybe he wants to avoid the common complaints on how the matches are boring or take too long, which were the usual complaints for the PXG and Nigeria games. This is especially true considering that these group stage matches aren't that important. Many people were probably more interested in this game, yeah, but also the Japan versus France game in the finals alongside Japan versus Spain and Japan versus Germany, so that they could see, Loki, they could see Hugo and Charles, they could see Bunny, Sai, and Kaiser, and any other new Gen 11 player, right? But in order to get to those matches, you gotta get through the group stages first, and you can't just skip them. That's why he probably wanted to rush these games, because realistically people were not interested in the Nigeria game. Now obviously they weren't interested when they were reading weekly, because Onazi or Kuso or whoever didn't manage to score a single goal, but even then, before it started, they probably didn't care as much. Nonetheless, that's my first point. Just improve the pacing, giving the game at least 10 more chapters, or make it a similar length to the bastard Munchen vs Mansain City match, so that we can get more focus on certain characters. Because out of all the games in the group stages, this one could have benefited the most from being longer. And speaking of other characters getting more focus, Aiku should have received more focus than Kunigami and Otoya. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, even though I like that Kunigami got subbed in and had a defensive feat against Loki, that's pretty much all he did. He did try to stop Hugo's offensive attack, but that didn't work, and he did try to catch the loose ball from Isagi and Rin's, mostly Rin's, failed shot course, but that also didn't work. In each of his attempts to be useful, it led to Loki scoring anyways. I thought that when he subbed on, he was going to be more of like a physical defense against Hugo, so that Isagi can be more free and open. Hugo was definitely a physical threat, you can't deny that, and Kunigami would have been useful in shutting that down, similarly to how he shut down Shido, but he barely did anything, so I don't really know. So it's either you don't sub him in or have him be way more involved, because you're giving attention to a character who barely does anything in this game. And he's in the same boat as Otoya, because really, what did Otoya do? Otoya made a shot attempt, which was blocked by Loki, and he did some link-up plays, but ultimately, you wouldn't rate him highly in this game. If you were gonna look at who was the best player in this match, you wouldn't rate Otoya in the top 10, although he only subbed on for like 15 minutes, so he really couldn't do much, but my point still stands. I remember reading a comment in the Blue Lock subreddit asking why Aiku couldn't be the one to block Loki's header instead of Kunigami. So I was thinking that instead of Kunigami being subbed on, just save him for the next game, the one against England, and make it so that Aiku was the one that did that defensive header. This way, you give him, like a defensive feat and have him do something this game, because bro did not touch the ball once. Need I repeat that? Which is hilarious, because Nico and Ryu managed to touch the ball, but Aiku, the literal captain of the team, did not. Even Isagi, who was said to be quote-unquote useless, did more than him. In fact, let's change the whole conversation. Many people were saying that Isagi was useless, when Ryu and Aiku were probably the most useless people on the pitch. At least Isagi touched the ball, he was involved in link-up plays, and he had a goal attempt that was ruined by Rin. He at least did something. But like I said, don't sub on Kunigami. I would have just saved him for the England match and just make Aiku do everything that Kunigami did. That way, we have less characters on the pitch we need to delegate attention towards. And speaking of Aiku, I would have liked a Loki vs Aiku rivalry, a captain versus captain ordeal. I wouldn't concentrate heavily on this, just showcase tidbits here and there. We already saw Aiku attempting to stop Loki countless times, which he failed at. So I would have it be a captain versus captain scenario, where you got France's captain, who is a striker, versus Japan's captain, who is a defender, and they try to stop each other. Now obviously Aiku is going to fail a lot of the time, but by replacing Kunigami with Aiku to do that defensive header instead, it would have at least given Aiku 1 win against Loki, where he was able to stop him from scoring that goal. Somewhat of a character development for him, you know? Similarly to that moment in the Nigeria game. Because him failing to stop Loki, that isn't my problem specifically with him. That is to be expected. You want Loki to be a threat, so you have to make him a threat to the defenders. That makes perfect sense to me. But Aiku still looked useless out there, like he wasn't even trying. I mean, he has metavision, yeah? Metavision, like use it. Use it. Nico used it and it worked out. He stopped a passing course. But anyways, since I mentioned Loki, just have Loki score a hat trick. How is it that Kaiser scored a hat trick before him? I want Loki to score a hat trick, and I would make it so that he scored a goal in the first half. Reading this weekly, the conversation was that Loki isn't much of a threat and that he's a fraud. Even though Loki scored, 2 goals and had a cool goal celebration, the fact that he scored 1 goal 75 minutes into the game and another during additional time confuses me. And the last one was only possible because Isagi and Rin missed a shot. It creates a situation where Loki is a good new Gen 11, but I think he would have solidified that more if you had him score 1 goal in the first half. That way, him scoring 2 more goals in the latter half would have been fine because he at least already got a goal in the first one. Now, I get the argument that Loki wasn't trying and all that stuff, Blue Lock sweat scaling or something. And that's fine, but reading this weekly is different from reading this game overall. Because reading this game in full makes it a little bit better to witness Loki not scoring as much, but reading weekly was just a different experience altogether, It could be a thing where maybe he scores the opening goal instead of Charles, but I also kind of want Charles to score that goal. Either way, we can figure something out. And with the mention of Charles, have Charles receive more focus by assisting Loki. With Loki scoring a hat trick in my version, I want Charles to be involved with at least 1 or 2 of them. So let's say Loki scores a goal in the first half, like I said, after Charles scored his opening goal. In that play, I'll have Charles assist Loki and it can be a grand chemical reaction. You can still have Hugo assist Loki afterwards as well. But yeah, you can have it so that in said hat trick, Loki scores his first goal with an assist from Charles. Then his second one thanks to Hugo's assist. And then in the end, you can still have him score a goal by himself. Either way, this ensures a Charles and Loki chemical reaction, even if it happens once in this game. However, another thing I want to mention is that I think the game would have benefited more if Hugo was actually a new Gen 11 defender instead of a midfielder. Now, hear me out. If Hugo was put into a defensive role, then it provides more focus towards Charles, allowing him to be the primary midfielder, resulting in more chemical reactions with Loki and other players. Again, this goes into my problem of having Hugo be on the same team with him, because why is Charles needed to help Loki if he has Hugo, Charles is not even my favorite character, but I'm just looking at it through narrative implications. If you were to have Hugo be a new generation defender, it makes France's defense team a lot stronger because I'll be honest with you, their defense sucks. A lot of their players do not get significance in this game, but I'll get back to that. With making Hugo a new generation defender, you could have him be more of like a physical threat that stops both Rin and Isagi from scoring a goal. Him being a threatening defender instead makes it so that this moment where Isagi managed to get past Hugo be more satisfactory, because he's already on defense a lot of the time. Just make him a defender. Now, it would be, like in this moment that I just described with him and Isagi, it would be that Isagi got past a defender that was giving him trouble, just like he did in the U20 game. And it would also, in this rewrite, mirror my Loki versus Aiku scenario. Here, you have the best striker on the France team going against Japan's captain, a defender, and then on the other side of the pitch, you would have the best defender on France's team going against a very prominent striker in Isagi Yoichi. So we would have created like a mirror situation, right? Especially when France's striker is giving Aiku a problem, whilst, Hugo is giving Isagi a problem, and their football roles have switched in that regard. With all this in mind, this change would have allowed for Charles to be the primary midfielder for all of Loki's goals. Now, this is just a hypothetical situation if Hugo was to be a defender instead. It doesn't have to be this way, as we can still keep him as a midfielder. But me wanting Hugo to be part of the defense for France to make them stronger highlights my next point. Make the France team more competent. Some of the players are just irrelevant, man. They're just so irrelevant. They don't even have lines of dialogue. What did they even do? I generally don't even know what they did. Like, what did this guy do? Does anybody remember his name? Or how about this guy right here? People kept getting past him and he didn't even know what to do. It's so bad that Hugo and Loki had to fall back to defend. Now, Loki being the striker to defend is terrible, right? Hugo being a midfielder going back to defend, and I think he's a defensive midfielder, right? Which adds to my point that he should be a defender instead. But anyways, that's probably something that happens in real life football, right? So I'm not even mad at that. But it's just one of those things where it's like, how is it that this team is supposed to be a threat when half of these players are just non-existent? The only players that were relevant on this entire team were Hugo, Loki, and Charles. And if you want to deep think it even further, Layden was actually pretty good, and so was Renoir. He may have only saved one goal, but that's more than other goalkeepers in Blue Lock can say. You could also put Camus on here, but he didn't do too much after Batra got subbed off. Now, I don't need every France player, to get focus, like tremendous focus, I mean. They were unfortunately just not that important to the narrative, I guess, or at least what Kaneshiro wanted to do. But I just need them to do something that makes it seem like the defense is also strong, just like the offense. You would think that for a team that's supposed to be the strongest in the world or the favorites to win, they'd have good defense or semi-decent defense. But they probably don't have to worry about it too much if they have a strong offense in, these three. And with a player like Loki, it makes sense not to worry too much because he's fast as hell, Have you seen him? Right here, he's moving so fast that he's warping the page. Now, in terms of making the France team more competent, what you also need to do is make the goal difference larger. Make France more of a dominating physical threat. Okay, so in theory, right, Kaneshiro did make this happen because if you think about it, every time that France got the ball, they scored in one chapter each. So, for example, when Charles scored in chapter 330, that was the same chapter in which the game began and France had the ball. Afterwards, it took Japan a couple more chapters to set up a play that would lead to them scoring an equalizer. But what happened 2 chapters later? Hugo immediately scored another one. It wasn't that hard to do, right? And then Karasu in response had to use Shido, which led to Baro getting a hyena goal, which took a couple chapters too. And then what happened afterwards? Literally in the next chapter, Loki got the ball and immediately scored. It then took a while for Isagi to build up a play in the Karasu system that would have allowed him to score a luck goal against Hugo if it wasn't for Rin the Bum Itoshi. And then what happened? Loki got the loose ball and immediately scored a goal. So what Kaneshiro showed us is that Blue Lock continuously works themselves to the bone to try and have a singular goal attempt, whilst for France they easily score as if it's just a regular Tuesday. The idea, especially with Loki yawning, is that they are barely even trying. However, convincing me that this team with these defenders are going to win the World Cup, especially when, again, said players didn't do a damn thing, is laughable. Are they gonna win against Spain and Germany? I don't even know. Kaneshiro could be doing something differently here though. Maybe he makes it so that France actually doesn't make it to the finals due to their arrogance. We don't really know. We'll just have to wait and see, right? Now, Kaneshiro is one of those writers where you think you can predict the story and it does something different. And which is funny because a lot of people are asking if Blue Lock is getting predictable. Now, he might do something different that you may not like, but it is something different. I don't think anyone expected, Nagi to actually get eliminated, or for, Isagi to score that goal he did in the Nigeria game. But at the end of the day, it was a pleasant surprise, and no one predicted Nigeria to not score a single goal in that game. But yeah, I would say just make it so that France scores 5 goals in total. So a Loki Hat-Trick, a Charles goal, and a Hugo goal. That is, if you want to keep Hugo as a midfielder. If you rather my suggestion of making him a defender instead, then you could have Layden be the one to score one of the 5 goals in my hypothetical rewrite. That way, you show France being a dangerous threat besides the core trio. Either way, France would score, 5 goals, maybe 6, whatever. And Japan could score either 2 or 3 goals because I'm not really certain if I want Hiyori to still have his goal. Because whilst that goal was cool, I wonder if Shido should have scored in Hiyori's place. Kind of just only making Blue Lock score in the second half. I would, however, keep Baro's goal. That masterpiece isn't going anywhere. Anyways, France could win, 5-2 or 5-3. So yeah, we'll have France score 3 goals in the first half, 1 from each of the trio, whilst Blue Lock manages to score 1, or maybe they don't score in the first half. And then later on in the second half, once Japan starts to utilize their substitutions, you level out the playing field a bit. You make it so that France struggles a bit to even get more goals because of who's on the field. Because with that, I want Japan's subs to be Shido and Baro alongside Zantetsu, who replaces Kunigami. Now, you gotta hear me out for a second, but first, there may be some people who might be confused because I said that Aiku should replace Kunigami. What I meant by this is that I'm saying that, Ego should, still substitute 3 players, but the one that he's gonna substitute instead of Kunigami is going to be Zantetsu, and then you're just gonna have Aiku do whatever, Kunigami was doing in the second half. But like I said, just hear me out for a second as I explain this, because we are also not subbing out Chigiri. We're gonna sub out Batra because, he's not really needed in this game. He got his time to focus in the Nigeria game, so we don't really need him in this one. And like I said, Nico has to go. We do need to keep Chigiri, like I said, and so Nico and Batra will sub out for Shido and Baro. And of course, like I said, we won't subbing Otoya, which means that Rail will stay on the field and he can help out in defense because Aiku surely needs it. But we're gonna have to sub out somebody, and that's probably gonna be Ryu because he touched the ball one time, but what else did he do? So in my version, Chigiri and Zantetsu face off against Loki, and by making them face off against him, intercepting his plays, preventing Hugo from making him a passing option, it reduces his scoring opportunities a bit in the second half, making it more acceptable to the reader as to why he doesn't score as much. However, he will still get past them eventually, demonstrating why he is the ultimate speedster. This also gives Chigiri something to do because he didn't do anything in the Nigeria game, which at the time I understood and I thought that was fine because the Nigeria game wasn't really something that needed him to have a narrative focus. I'm not expecting every game to focus on all the characters, that's just not realistic. In order to balance out these large cast of characters and give them attentive screen time, you gotta just focus on a set of characters in a particular game and then have another group be focused in another game. Regardless, with us having Chigiri and Zantetsu being subbed onto the pitch, this duo would help to stop Loki, giving Blue Lock an opportunity to get more goals. Thus, in my rewrite, France scores 3 goals in the first half, whilst Japan scores 1. And then later, once Chigiri and Zantetsu put a stop to Loki for a little while, Shido and Baro would each score a goal, giving them a fighting chance. This would reinforce France and Loki being a strong opponent because they needed to negate Loki to have an opportunity. But towards the end, it would be a fruitless attempt, as Loki would beat the two speedsters, showcasing his superior speed, and achieve the same goal he did when he had a chemical reaction with Hugo, making it 4-3. Then after Rin messes up Isagi's shot, Loki scores again, making it 5-3. Heck, we could even push the score even further to where France scores, 6 goals in total because Leighton manages to score another goal. Because I kind of just want Leighton to score, man. I did not expect him to get some focus. However, if we restrain ourselves and make the game 5-3 or 5-2 instead, we could still have Leighton make a shot attempt but make Gagamaru stop it from going in. Thus, in my rewrites, Gagamaru has one save. This gives him something to do in this game where he gets to touch the ball once, instead of looking like he has the fear of God in his eyes every time Loki or Hugo appears. Anyways, that's literally just it. Just give Gagamaru a save. And my next point, which is like my final one, is that we need a Isagi versus Loki conflict. How are you going to have Isagi smack talk Loki, making him livid, veins popping, and then make Loki specifically state that he's going to ask Isagi if he's so full of himself just because he happened to be born fast, just to have nothing come from that? So it's either you get rid of that line of dialogue, or you make it so that during 1 or 2 moments, Loki outmaneuvers Isagi in a play or two in the process of them having a conversation on the field. Perhaps he does a nutmeg or something, and then just scores a goal. Now that would add to the Isagi slander, I know, that he was already getting. Because I mean, bro was already getting slandered by Hugo and by the fans. And as an Isagi fan myself, even though it hurt to see, I just knew he was going to get his revenge. Or at least I thought he was, until Rin decided to be a bloody bum. But like I said, narrative importance, narrative implications. You gotta show the payoffs for these moments. Overall, those are the things I would add in a hypothetical rewrite, or at least consider in my rewrite for this game. This video was longer than I expected, the longest video on my channel by far, but if you made it to the end, thanks for watching. I really do appreciate it. Be sure to click on this playlist showcasing my reviews for all the Blue Lock chapters I've covered so far on this channel. Additionally, watch this video explaining my predictions for the U20 World Cup after the Nigeria game. With that, this video shall end. Remember to check out these artists and animators. Their links are in the description. But with all that being said, have a lovely rest of your day.